Before we start this lesson, I'd like to mention something that I forgot to mention before and I should have mentioned, and that is when you go to post migration, you'll notice that we have a user ID column that we are using to associate a post with a user ID, and that helps us to know a post belongs to what user. The thing is that we also require another column of category ID, and that will help us associate a post with a category ID, and that will help us to know a post belongs to what category. That affects nothing in this tutorial, I just forgot to mention, and we did not use it then because we had not yet created categories. So later when you start working on categories, I just want you to know that we will revisit this migration and update it to have a category ID. With that said, let's switch back to the main objective of this lesson, and the objective is to be able to request users input. And for one to be able to request users input, a user first should fill a form. After filling a form, they'll click submit, and after clicking submit, we need a URL here of where we want to send the inputs from the form. So let's go to web.php file and create that URL. So I'll copy this, then come here and paste. And now we are not creating a blog post, so we are storing, so I'll say store. And the end goal is to store a blog post to the database. So store blog post to the database. Then I'll come here and I'll update this method. Now we are using get, but now the thing is that we are not receiving something from the server, so we cannot use a get method. So we are going to use a post method. So after that, I'll come here, and from the way we've been creating the URL so far, you might want to come here and change this to store, and then change this to store method, and this route name to blog.store. And this will work just fine. There's nothing wrong with this. But in Laravel, there is a convention. When you're using a post method, you don't provide the action here. So you leave it like that. And it's good to understand the conventions so that when we start working on resource controllers, it will be very easy for you to understand what is happening and you'll not be confused. So I'll save this, then I'll go back to the form. So I'll provide the URL and I'll use the route name. So I'll say route, and the name is blog.store. The method from the controller is post method. Then, since we are using a file, an input with a type of file here, you need to include the enc type attribute, and it should be multipart form data. Whenever you are dealing with a file, you need to include this. If you don't, it will not work as expected, because you need this attribute to send a file. So I'll save, and the last thing to do is to protect this form from CSRF attacks. And it's very easy in Laravel. What you do is that you just provide the CSRF directive. So I'll come here and say at CSRF, then save. And that way we are done with the form. So let's go to the controller and create this store message. Not message, store method, sorry. Then come here, copy this, and the method is store. Then let's remove all this. So for us to be able to request the inputs, we will use the request object. So I'll come here and I'll inject it. I'll say request. Then we have several of them. So come here, make sure you choose the one with illuminate HTTP request. So I'll select the first one. Then I'll put it in a variable. So I'll say request. So this is just this object. I've stored it in a variable. So I can use this variable to access the methods inside the object. So I can come here. If I want to request something, I can just say, let's say all inputs. Let's take a variable and say all inputs is equal to, then I'll use the request variable, then I'll just use the all method from the request object. So I'll say all, and from this I can just die and dump all inputs to see if it's working, then save. So let's see if this is working. Go to the form, refresh, provide something, just say title 1, choose a file, come here, provide something, I'll just say body 1, then submit. And when you do that, we get everything from the form. We get a token, this is generated by the CSRF. We get the title, is title 1, body, we have body 1 inside the p tags. Then you have the image here, and you have its original name, MIME type, and a lot of information about the file, the image file. And that is how you request inputs from a form. But in this case, we requested everything. What if you want just to request one input? So you can delete all this. Let's say maybe we just want the title. You can say title equals to, then request, use the input method. Then in here you pass the value of the name attribute. So you go to the form, and the name attribute, the value is title. So if you want to request from this input, so if you want to request from this, the name attribute is body. So let's request the title. So go back to the controller, and I'll have this as title. Then here I'll just then dump the title. Let's see if that is working. Go back, refresh, let's say title 2, then submit, and there we go, we are able to request the input. But now if you go to your form, refresh, then don't provide anything, then submit, you'll end up with null. And we wouldn't want this, because if you allow this, a user might post a blog post by mistake without providing the title, and we will end up with a blog post without a title, and we would really not want that. So in the next video, let's see how we can validate so that a user, when they try to post a blog post without a title, we can be able to tell them you've not provided a title, you need to provide a title, and we cannot allow to post a blog post without a title. With that said, thank you very much for watching and your continued support. If this video has been of any help to you, kindly consider supporting my work by subscribing, leaving a comment and a like. Cheers.